So it's interesting because I think in the startup world, as it becomes more normalized and as the expectations come higher, the desire or the entertaining the possibility of cheating increases. And where you'll see this is basically lying about numbers. It's the most common area. Lying about revenue, lying about traffic, lying about growth, lying about deals, lying about LOIs. And as YC has become more popular, we've actually had to tune ourselves to detect these sort of things and kind of put some protections in place in the admissions process to make sure that we're catching these things. And I think what's interesting and what founders probably don't grasp is that once you're caught cheating, especially early days, especially when you're kind of a low reputation early stage founder, it could basically be you're done. Like you are flirting with a career-ending decision. And I think that's not well understood from a founder's perspective because most of the founders are just living, their experience. But being on the investor side, you would be surprised how often someone will bring up a person or a company, and then the note will be like, you don't want to deal with that. And then it's just like automatic disqualification. Automatic. Because part of it is like you don't even really want to know the details, right? Like what I don't know doesn't hurt me. And of course you have to get this, kind of shake off from a reliable, honest, trustworthy person. But I think that so often what founders don't realize is there's almost no statute of limitations on having a bad reputation. Like if you screw up your reputation, especially in the startup world that's so small, it can be game over. And it can kind of persist because people know who you've worked with in the startup world. So even when you get into the employment world or other worlds, when people go and reference check you, boom. And it won't even be that someone will say something bad. They won't even tell the story. They'll just be like, yeah, I don't know. And that's enough. That's enough. Ice. And I think a lot of times people, when they're considering cheating, they think they're going to get some short-term gain, which probably not going to get, right? Because startups, 99.9% die, right? And they have no concept of how horrible the long-term costs are. And it's almost always the case that they'll get exposed eventually. It's almost always the case. Often because it's so hard for startups to succeed. That I think that sometimes they think, well, if I cheat this month numbers, I'll make it up next month. And it's kind of like that's hard. You can't just study harder and make your startup better. But I think it's not talked about enough because I think on the other side, why you shouldn't cheat is because if you have a reputation of being honest and working hard, the startup world is this unique world that'll give you so many chances. In fact, second-time founders have an easier time fundraising, an easier time hiring. Everything is easier, even if their first startup was a failure, because they're a little bit de-risked, right? I know they're not going to take the money and do something bad with it. I know they can at least hire a couple people. I know they can at least launch something. And so on the flip side, I think people are too hyper-focused on executing on their current company, and they're not thinking about this as a life decision where maybe it's their second or third or fourth company that's going to be the one that really makes it. But if they destroy their reputation, they'll never have the chance to do 2, 3, and 4. And it's scary because these things stretch over years. There are people who, once you get the mark, maybe you should leave the country if you want to do startups. It's that bad. And so it's something I warn people of especially because now expectations are higher, there is maybe more of a feeling hey, let me just cheat to make my numbers a little better, and it's just it's not worth it. The other thing that I think founders don't realize is that cheating or things that are kind of approaching cheating, you probably aren't as good at it as you think. And anyone who's seen the tricks a number of times probably can detect the fact that when you change labels on the axis and the graph, or when you make the graph square versus right, like, all the things you think you're doing, it's kind of like when you wrote a paper and you triple space the lines. Like, it's just like, it's your teacher's probably seen that move before. And so it's actually hard to cheat well, which is another reason why probably you shouldn't do it.